Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Kate, and I'm an Advocacy and Partnerships Officer here at the Global Education Monitoring Report. And we are excited to welcome you today to the School Leadership Matters Summit, which we're delighted to co-host with global school leaders. Before we begin today's discussion, just a couple of quick housekeeping rules. Please select the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred language. You're able to follow today's discussion in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. The session will last for approximately 60 minutes, which includes a Q&A. To ask questions of our speakers today, we'll be using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And the speakers will attempt to also monitor this throughout the discussion and answer your questions directly. A gentle reminder to please keep comments respectful in the Q&A to ensure a positive and productive environment. Now that's out of the way. Hello, hola, and bonjour. Welcome to you all, and we are thrilled to have you joining us today. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. Today, we are joined by an excellent group of panelists from across the Global South and beyond. We are grateful to have Deborah Kimathi from Education Workforce Initiative and Systems Delivery Lead at the Learning Generation Initiative as our moderator today, joined by a panelist, Bronwyn Bevan from the Wallace Foundation, Miriam Mason from EducAid Sierra Leone, Sam Marigat from the Regional Directors for Teacher Service Commission Kenya, and Alejandra Yuszczyssyn from a school leader from Argentina. Today's session will unpack what it takes for school leaders to flourish, examining how policies, structures, and relationships at every level of education systems can enable or constrain leadership. We'll have a poll during today's discussion, so please keep your eye out for that on your screens. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, and over to you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Kate, and a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining us from across the globe for this really exciting conversation. I think it's a really important topic, one that takes up a lot of our headspace and time at the Learning Generation Initiative as we think about what allows school leaders to thrive, and in turn, of course, teachers and learners. And I think it's really critical that we turn our attention to the system in which we challenge all of our school leaders to operate in, and really unpack some questions around how that system allows school leaders to thrive. What's the role of autonomy and trust, and how that comes into play in relationships between the system actors and the school leaders? How do we ensure the system and those relationships enable effective instructional leadership and quality support? How do we balance the requirements from the system for kind of heavy administrative oversight and even compliance with meaningful instructional support that drives teaching and learning in the right direction? And together, we hope to explore some of the strategies that we can apply to our thinking around system leaders and their support for school leaders. So do join us. As I say, use the Q&A to plug in and ask questions, as Kate has shared with us. We are really excited to hear from you as we hear from each of our panelists. But now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our panelists. We have 4 really exciting guests with us today, truly from across the globe. And so I'm going to welcome each of them one by one for the first round of discussion. So we have with us Dr. Bronwyn Bevan, the Vice President of Research at the Wallace Foundation, a New York-based philanthropy. Bronwyn commissioned studies on the practices and impacts of effective and equity-centered school leaders and on the systems that produce and support them. We're also joined all the way from Sierra Leone by Dr. Miriam Mason, who is the Country Director of EducAid for Sierra Leone, a charity that provides high-quality education to some of the country's most underserved children. Since 2000, she's worked in Sierra Leone to strengthen the education sector through innovative, low-tech and high-tech, values-led programs. Welcome, Miriam. We're also really excited to welcome all the way from Argentina, Alejandra Yuszczyssyn, who is a global educational consultant, pedagogical leader, and innovative trainer, currently serving as a primary school director in Buenos Aires. She's a T4 education ambassador and an advocate for connecting schools across Latin America with the world through collaborative projects and global partnerships. And last but not least, and the only male we have on our panel today, Dr. Sam Marigat, all the way from Kenya. Dr. Marigat is an educator who has climbed the professional ladder from the classroom right through the ranks through school leader. He's worked in several counties in Kenya as a county director, spearheading reforms in teacher management and in the middle tier. One of the reforms he led was an initiative called Napenda Kusoma, which means I love to read, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about that today, that it was inspired by his experience in Sobral in Brazil. He's currently the regional director for Rift Valley, the largest region in Kenya with oversight over 14 counties. And if he's not with us quite yet, I think he will be shortly. So this first round of discussion, we'd love to hear from each of our panelists, just your opening reflections on this topic. In your experience and in the context in which you work, how have autonomy, trust, and supportive ecosystems enabled school leaders to succeed? And what challenges arise when those conditions are lacking? And I'm going to come to you first, Bronwyn.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here and excited to hear the conversation that we have and we hear from our audience. So I want to just start off by saying that the Wallace Foundation, we're a philanthropy based in New York. We fund in the United States. We fund a lot in school leadership and primarily at the systems level. But I'm also saying that because I am not an expert on school leadership. So I'm coming to you as a funder of experts who do the work, who lead schools, who lead systems, and who conduct research on that work. So I'm eager to actually learn here as much as I can share. So, but to your question, and I'll be drawing on the research that we funded over the years to answer the questions. One of our primary goals at working at the systems level is to think about really continuous improvement and continuous learning. So we believe that for systems to ultimately be effective at any level, including all the way down to young people in the classroom, there needs to be a process of continuous learning. And that, of course, requires, that's a requirement for effective leadership. And the research on adult learning is pretty clear that adult learning needs to be autonomous, it needs to be self-directed, problem-driven, sort of based in realities and interactive. And that sort of aspect of adult learning therefore requires autonomy and trust to allow people to figure out what they need to do and learn to move forward. And just a couple of issues: how does a system how does an ecosystem support that process of continuous learning? We have funded the Learning Policy Institute to conduct a study that's currently underway on professional development. And one of the things that they're documenting is how the needs of school leaders change over time. And so what people, interestingly, they're finding, it seems, that early school leaders and more veteran school leaders actually are seeking less support than people kind of in the middle, which is a little bit of a surprise. But it's an indication of how the leaders themselves know best what they need and when. And just one other study, and then I'll stop. Is we're funding researchers at Vanderbilt and their colleagues to document how school leaders learn in informal ways. So it's not professional development, but they're informal learning. And what they find is that the peer networks, or peer relationships and networks, are really crucial, and that systems need to provide school leaders the time to develop those relationships and to engage in them. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Bronwyn. And I think already some really rich insight there. And I think much that does carry across contexts, particularly the last point around kind of the importance of peer-to-peer networks, either to bridge potentially gaps in the system's provision or to bolster it. Miriam, can I come to you next and ask you the same question from your context? What's been the role of autonomy, trust, and supportive ecosystems in enabling school leaders to thrive and succeed?
Good afternoon, everybody. Just delighted to be here. And our context could probably barely be more different from Sierra Leone in West Africa to Bronwyn's in the States. A couple of things just to put things in context. The education system here has been very much neglected. And so school leaders, traditionally over the decades have taken their positions out of longevity or connections. And so of recent date, the ministry, the government of Sierra Leone have really started prioritizing education. We've had free education from pre-primary through to the end of senior secondary for the first time ever as an attempt at universal education since 2018. And part of that change has been addressing the need for formal school leadership training and, to a recognition of the importance of school leaders if we're going to see school transformation and transformation of quality. I tend to categorize the problems in Sierra Leonean schools, but I think it probably goes a lot broader than Sierra Leone in two ways. One is the tendency to antagonistic, and it was 2021 that corporal punishment was eradicated, was banned. So it hasn't been eradicated, but it's been banned. And so antagonistic, if not violent, relationships in the classroom. And the other is the teaching for teaching's sake. And so we talk about needing a generational fire break, stop that passing on from one generation to the next generation of those damaging behaviors. What I had done to me was good enough for me. I'm going to pass it on to the next. And if you don't have a vision of something different, then why not? So we keep talking about a generational fire break where we would see those antagonistic relationships become respectful relationships, where we would see the teaching for teaching's sake be transformed for teaching for learning. So if you haven't learnt yet, I haven't taught yet. And the school leader must be the owner of that. And so if they own that transformation, there are some chances that the teachers will be able to bring that into their classrooms. And so we are seeing more and more in Sierra Leone that school leadership is being valued as a thing, that school leadership as ownership of instruction and the whole ethos of the school is massively important. You're not just the administrator. You're not just the person who goes to the bank to collect the teacher's pay. You're not just the one that, fills in forms for government. Whatever happens in this school, you own. So the autonomy hasn't been there. But it's been there in the wrong ways. Like I can get on with what I want to do because there's not enough boots on the ground in terms of the ministry supervision, but not really that sort of autonomous ownership of learning and the quality of teaching. Trust, very limited. And now we're starting to turn that round. So I won't go on. But maybe that creates a picture of where we're coming from in our context.
Yeah. Thanks, Miriam. And it strikes me that so much of this conversation needs to be shaped around kind of the relationships and power dynamics that exist within our schools and within the system. And that much of what you've shared ties back to how those relationships have sometimes not been what they should be, and perhaps even been a little dysfunctional. And that those in their kind of revisioning of the purpose of teaching and the purpose of education can perhaps then that reshapes those relationships in powerful ways. Alejandra, allow me to come to you next and pose the same question. How have autonomy, trust, and supportive ecosystems enabled school leaders to thrive? And just a reminder to our audience, if you need to, please switch your translation to English, as Alejandra will be responding in Spanish. Over to you, Alejandra.
Muchas gracias por esta oportunidad. Estoy muy contenta de estar aquí. Hablo inglés, pero me siento más cómoda hablando en español, que es mi lengua materna, sobre todo para hablar de un tema tan delicado como este. Espero me estén escuchando e interpretando bien. La autonomía, la confianza y un ecosistema de apoyo son condiciones esenciales para un liderazgo pedagógico efectivo. En primer lugar, la autonomía permite que los equipos directivos y docentes tomen decisiones pedagógicas vinculadas a la realidad y a las necesidades de cada uno de sus estudiantes, poniéndolos en el centro. Sin autonomía, el liderazgo se reduce a ejecutar instrucciones externas, perdiendo el sentido y la capacidad de transformación. Por otro lado, la confianza, un liderazgo basado en la confianza, es el vínculo que sostiene las relaciones dentro de la escuela. No solo dentro de la escuela, sino todo tipo de relación creo que tiene que estar basado en la confianza. Las de amistad, la de pareja y sobre todo un liderazgo basado en la confianza. Sin confianza es muy complicado liderar. Cuando la confianza está presente, el liderazgo no se siente como un control, sino como un acompañamiento, una construcción compartida. Un ecosistema de apoyo que incluya redes profesionales, formación continua, acompañamiento institucional, permite que este liderazgo se sostenga en el tiempo. El liderazgo pedagógico necesita espacios para aprender de otros, reflexionar y crecer. Si bien soy directora de escuela hace muchos años, quiero destacar la importancia de la red a la que pertenezco, en la que trabajamos hace 5 años, que es la red de líderes a nivel internacional, en la que venimos trabajando y aprendiendo con otros y de otros, y es sumamente importante apoyarse en colegas porque descubrimos que todos los líderes, más allá del lugar donde estemos, compartimos los mismos desafíos. Así que esto es importante, si bien la práctica es lo que nos hace el día a día enfrentar estos desafíos, estas redes que fuimos creando, en las que fuimos participando, creo nos han brindado muchas herramientas que a mí en lo personal me permiten hoy estar aquí hablando con panelistas de este nivel. Así que muchas gracias y espero hayan podido comprender lo que quise transmitir.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. And I love the statement you've made that without trust, we can't lead. And I think that's a really profound statement as a school principal. And I think you've drawn out this tension that sometimes there is for school leaders between kind of just following instructions, ticking the box, complying with whatever the powers above have said, versus leaning into trusted relationships that really allow you and your school to thrive. And I love how you've pointed to the fact that that trust also allows you to build such strong relationships with your peers. And those relationships and networks also bolster your leadership further. Thank you. Finally, to Dr. Marigat in Kenya. We'd love to hear from you, Dr. Marigat. What's your thoughts on kind of the role of autonomy and trust as part of a supportive ecosystem for school leaders, and what challenges arise when those conditions are lacking?
So great, thank you very much. Nice to interact with all of you. my name is Samuel Marigat from Kenya. And it's interesting, just like you said in the introduction, I have had the privilege of being everything in a school. So starting from the class, becoming a class teacher, head of subject, head of department, in charge of activities, the deputy principal, county director. So I think the far I've come is I have practiced all those things. And we have a saying in Kenya that a school is as good as a principal, and that the principal is as good as a school, which I can rephrase and still say, a school is as good as a school leader. And a school is also as bad as a school leader. So those two go together. And we've seen in our setup in Kenya, sometimes when you get a school leader, even a school which was really down, instantly you'll find results change. And sometimes you find a school which is running well, when the leader retires or exits, if you don't get a suitable replacement, you will find the school goes down. And so we say, again, the school either rises or falls with the head. That's the school leader. Interesting. Trust, autonomy, a good working environment. All those things are related in my opinion. One, you cannot be, in Kenya, let me start with autonomy. I'm saying that one of the challenges we have in our country is a word called comply. Every time you get people at the system level, for me, I work at the mid level. Every time they talk to junior officers, they talk school leaders, they tell them comply, follow instructions, follow to the letter. And if you get stuck, ask, we'll tell you what to do. So now, when you have less autonomy, it means there will be less creativity. There's be less impetus to do things. Because sometimes there are things you want to do, but if you feel your senior will not approve it, then you keep quiet, and then eventually we lose it. Number two, you cannot be autonomous if there is no trust. Because you've got to be trusted to try new things, to try new methods of teaching, to try new activities. You've got to be trusted. And that trust and autonomy can only exist, again, in an enabling environment. So that enabling environment by the school leader, to be able to ensure that the people working with them can be trusted to make decisions which are also autonomous without referring to them every time, and to be able to serve well. And so, again, finally, these two things work together. And I see them working jointly. That for you to be trusted, you've got to earn the trust. For you to be autonomous, you've got to earn the autonomy, because you've got to be responsible. And a good working environment will enable all of them. Because autonomy without trust will definitely be chaotic. And now, if you are trusted and there's no autonomy, then you stagnate. Because you can't do anything, because it's like your legs and hands are tied, and your lips, and then you are expected to do what you can do. So all the three, in my opinion, are very critical for the teachers, the school leaders to be able to serve. The board needs to support them. The board needs to trust them. The board needs to give them leg room to be able to make decisions, a level of autonomy, and you will see how creative they are going to be. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And I think you've made a couple of profound statements there towards the end, that autonomy without trust is chaotic, and trust without autonomy leads to stagnation. And I think that's something really powerful for us to reflect on. And there's an interesting chat unfolding in the Q&A around kind of the capacity that school leaders need for autonomy. And I think that comes into play in this as well. So perhaps we'll dig into that in a few minutes. I want to take a pause from our panelists to put a poll question to our audience. So you should see the poll pop up automatically on your screen. And we'd love to hear from all of you. The poll question, and it's about what most hinders effective leadership. Do you agree that it's this lack of trust and communication, lack of autonomy? Do you think it's limitations to capacity and training, gaps in professional development for school leaders? Or do you think it's this kind of compliance versus learning environment with perhaps more weight placed on compliance? And I think another issue that's on that list is the issue of fragmentation. And do you find that the fragmentation within our systems often hinders the kind of flourishing of school leaders? So you should see the poll pop up on your screen. I am not seeing it on mine. There we go. It has come up now. So please do just click one answer, and we'll see in a few moments what the sense from the audience is. If you want to further just a reflection or prompt, if this prompts another question, feel free to use the Q&A and put that in there. Let us know how your thinking is developing even as we have this conversation. We do hope to be able to come to the chat in a few minutes and see what's there, bring some of the questions to our panelists. So the poll is still open. Take a moment, just cast your vote. And we'll get to see what the results are just shortly. So as we wait to see the results from the poll, we're going to move into our next round of discussion with our panelists. And my request to each of you panelists in this next round of discussion is if you could just keep your answers brief so that we can go around the table, as it were, a couple of times. But before we jump in, we see the poll results now up on the screen. Systems that strengthen school leaders, you should see that there. And we have at the top of the list of what hinders effective instructional leaders, one, limited capacity and training, and second, focus on compliance over learning support. Not so far behind, we have lack of trust and communication and fragmented or weak system supports. And interestingly, the option on the list seen as the least hindrance is the lack of autonomy. So really intriguing to see those responses actually. So jumping back into our questions, I'd love for us to unpack from across our different contexts, how do we see system leaders translating national education goals into action at the school level? We often talk about system leaders or the middle tier and being that kind of bridge between national education policies and what happens in the classroom. How have you seen this in action? And this time, Miriam, I'd love to start with you.
I was not expecting that.
Sorry, just keeping you on your toes.
In our context, what we find is, like I say, we're very under-resourced and it's been a very neglected sector. But what we're starting to find work is uniting around a small number of agreed target behaviors. So if you think about those two categories of the aggressive relationships and the teaching for teaching, and the transformation of that, we've worked on 5 strategies that address the relationships and 5 that address the teaching for learning. And we've got all of our school quality assurance officers the deputy director for the district, and we've worked with them really, really closely so that the ministry field team and leadership team are taking the same message to every single school they go to. So it's sort of anti-autonomy, except that there's not the manpower to be then going and enforcing. So the follow-up, the support is through WhatsApp groups and conversations and that sort of thing, but slowing down to speed up, really trying to support people and having a vision of what's possible in terms of a different way forward, but really a small number of target behaviors that then can be added to. We've done like mini videos of all of those strategies, because you can't target what you can't imagine. And if it's that foreign from what you've been doing before, then it doesn't even make sense unless you can picture it. So our strategy has really been to make sure that the whole district team for the Ministry of Education is united in an understanding of what excellence looks like, so that they can support from whatever direction, and it's going to be a united message. It's not down to lesson plans, it's not structured pedagogy, but it's united around, create a kind classroom, know your child's level of mastery at all times, support and develop children's executive functioning. It's sort of high level that can be then interpreted, but that united team approach. We're talking about STEAM, school quality assurance officers, reaching 750 something schools. So they're not in there every day, but at least like every contact that they have with the ministry now is starting to be that same message.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Miriam. No, I was just going to say, I know you've said it's almost anti-autonomy, but I don't think it is. I think that kind of framing can enable autonomy in that it creates this clarity of expectations, this consistency of kind of vision and mission and purpose that unites and brings people's kind of disparate actions and behaviors together. So I appreciate that support. And Alejandra, in Argentina, I think you've done some similar work kind of reflecting on how national education goals translate to school level. So we'd love to hear a little bit more of your experience.
Quería agregar que en mi contexto, la traducción de los objetivos educativos nacionales a la práctica escolar ocurre a través del liderazgo pedagógico situado. Los lineamientos nacionales establecen un horizonte común a todas las escuelas, como la mejora de los aprendizajes, la inclusión, proyectos de alfabetización, y es en cada escuela donde esos propósitos se vuelven realidad y es el líder quien adapta a su escuela y pone en práctica herramientas pedagógicas con su personal para llevarlo a cabo. Entiendo que nuestro rol como líder pedagógico es interpretar esas políticas y darle sentido en función de nuestra comunidad educativa. Así como nosotros les decimos a los maestros que tengan en cuenta la diversidad de estudiantes, estamos en comunicación con esta posibilidad de que también las escuelas tengamos flexibilidad para adaptar esos lineamientos a las realidades institucionales. Los objetivos nacionales con los equipos docentes para generar comprensión y acuerdos compartidos es la base, y luego nuestro rol es la planificación colaborativa, como les mencionaba antes, en acompañamiento dentro de las escuelas y en las aulas, con estrategias de inclusión y evaluación formativa para poder llevar a cabo estas prácticas en la realidad, ¿no? Es importante monitorear y retroalimentar continuamente, ajustando a las necesidades reales de cada estudiante dentro de nuestra escuela. Y quiero destacar el poder, el poder de las redes, como la red global de líderes. Para mí fue fundamental esta red porque me permitió aprender horizontalmente con líderes que atraviesan desafíos similares, compartiendo soluciones reales y construyendo sentido de comunidad que sostiene el liderazgo más allá de las estructuras formales que cada uno tiene en su país o en su continente o en su escuela. Creo que las políticas nacionales marcan el para qué, pero el liderazgo escolar define cómo, define el camino y se fortalece cuando sentimos que no estamos solos, sino que estamos en red, aprendiendo y liderando de manera colectiva con otros. Creo que eso es muy importante al momento de llevar a cabo los proyectos en las escuelas y adaptarlos a las realidades institucionales diferentes, por supuesto, siguiendo el lineamiento de cada uno de los países.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Alejandra. And I think there's some real rich insights that come out there. I think this need for agility and how do we enable agility amongst our school leaders, but also the officers who support them. And you've brought us back again to this idea of the collective and the importance of peer-to-peer networks and support and enabling this kind of translation across contexts, even within one country and across schools and across challenges, so that we see that impact at the classroom that we're looking for. Bronwyn, I want to come to you next, and I want us to skip to the next question. And it would be great for you to share a little bit from your research around how you see current governance systems enabling or hindering system leaders from driving instructional improvement.
Sure. And I guess one thing I wanted to say, sorry, just a little bit to the last question, was just to throw it in there, is that a study that Grissom and colleagues did of 20 years of research did identify that while instructional leadership is absolutely core, that it takes place within a building that requires organizational management and also people management. So, to reach this kind of autonomy and trust, and that the teachers also need to engage in instructional leadership, they, collaboration with other teachers and within the building is important. So I just want to say that the research shows that these are very deeply entwined. Where instructional leadership was ignored for a long time, it now some of the other sort of people management skills. And actually one other note, which is that another study being conducted by the Learning Policy Institute is finding that it's people management skills that, especially new, but also sort of throughout their career, that leaders are looking for. But to your question about, how current government governance structures affect this, I think what I would say is, we have funded over the past 15 years, maybe not quite that long, what we're calling principal pipelines. So it is about how the entire system of support for leaders can work together and collectively. And I'm talking about in the US, school leaders have to receive certification through universities to be school leaders. So how are the universities that are preparing leaders working with the school districts that are hiring them? How are the people who are hiring and placing school leaders, how are they communicating with those people who are assessing and evaluating and coaching them and that sort of thing? And I think a big takeaway from this work is while we've been working with a lot of wonderful school districts that are implementing all of these reforms, the nature of the school district in large urban settings in this country, at any rate, is very fragmented. So while even though these what we might call improvements or reforms are taking place, the people are working in their different sort of, we call them silos or stovepipes, their different offices, and not actually always coming together in ways that can really strongly align the system to actually even meet the goals. And we've recently funded researchers at a group called Mathematica to actually look at the research on existing research on school district changes and redesign. And they've identified sort of 3 different models, and I'll stop after I say this. One is they talk about reorganization, and that's where people in the central governance central office, they may get new positions, new titles, new reporting arrangements, but it's really a reorganization. Another sort of stage is what they call redesign, and that's where actually it's more than just what's on a piece of paper, but actually people are expected to work differently in new ways for new goals. And then there's transformation, which is sort of the ultimate sort of level of change. And what we're finding is that this lack of redesign, a sort of staying in the reorg phase of transformation, really can hinder change. So with all the good intentions, things don't actually take root. And another thing, my last comment, is that we also have found that the top leadership in the school district, because there's such a high rate of turnover in this country in that position, reforms get started and then they're not given the time to take root. And therefore the research is lacking in talking about how the systems can actually be redesigned, transformed to support change.
Yeah, I think your last point is a really important one, that reform can't be invested in kind of one individual, but has to be a kind of initiative of the system that's supported much more broadly, so that it's not independent on individual leadership. Much easier said than done, of course, but I think a really important point. And I think what you've kind of nudged us towards as well is recognizing that education reform and managing education reform is an exercise in change management. And that's a huge piece of that, is managing the people and the relationships and the power dynamics that come into play in whatever change it is we are kind of pursuing within our education system. And I think that's really actually often overlooked and deserves much more of our attention. Thank you, Bronwyn. So, jumping to our next question, and after this, we're going to hear from the audience chat a little bit. But first, I'd love to hear from some of our panelists about concrete strategies or practices. There's, I think, this growing body of evidence from kind of an international setting that says the role of the middle tier, these system leaders, is important. We know it has the potential to impact on teaching and learning, but we know less about the how. And I think the how, the strategies, the practices, the behaviors, the routines that actually enable kind of meaningful, impactful support from the middle tier, from the system to the school leader, is something that's still kind of being unpacked for us all across the sector. So I'd love to hear, in your experience, and we'll jump from context to context, what strategies or practices have been successful in allowing system leaders to strengthen teaching and learning. So perhaps we'll go to Kenya first. Dr. Marigat, what strategies or practices have you seen work?
Great. I want to say this. I have worked in the middle tier for the rest of my teaching career. And I can confess, it's a very powerful tier. It's a very powerful tier which is less exploited. I know the funders usually want to support at the system level, so that we have very nice policies. And once the policies are done, unfortunately, sometimes the policies just rest there, gathering dust. But where the action is, where the rubber meets the road, is the middle tier. The middle tier is like a bridge. It's like a gate to implementation. Once there is a policy in place, it is the role of the middle tier to interpret that policy in a manner which is understood either by the teachers or by the learners, or also in a manner which is contextualized and which is affordable. I want to share my brief story. I had the privilege to travel to Sobral with a team from from Kenya, and we joined with Pakistan. And I was amazed that we were amazed at how in a short while, a village school has among the highest literacy levels in the world. And so while we are there, just like the normal conferences, people said, can you go to your teams and say, what would you like to do? For me, when we went to the Team Kenya, I decided to take a risk. And I said, I want to go and implement something. One, let's go and implement literacy in the county which I was in charge of. Because I asked myself and I say, what do I need? The textbooks are already provided by government. I work in the government. We have teachers. We have quality assurance officers. We have vehicles belonging to government. And this is our core business anyway. And remember, our target is that by year 10, every learner needs to read. And therefore, how can we actualize that? And so I took the risk and I asked my colleagues to join me, and we go to Kenya and go and implement. And so I was working in a county called Kirinyaga, and I asked all the colleagues who are there, what can you bring on board? Those who are expertise in school leadership, those who are expertise in assessment. And we went and established a system on literacy called Napenda Kusoma, which means I love to read. And we didn't even pilot, because I said, the moment you want to do pilot, when will you do scale? And given that every learner deserves to get education, and in a very short while, it's an exciting journey we have taken. I moved away from that county, but it is going on. But it just goes to tell you that the middle tier, as long as something is not illegal, there's so much that they can do within their space. Thank you.
No, and I think it's a really good example of how a middle tier with vision and a sense of purpose and an understanding of what their role it should be seeking to achieve across the system can actually drive progress.
Maybe just some 2 seconds. One, so how is that achievable? One, you need to bring everybody on board. Because the vision that you have, you must bring other people so that they buy the vision and they support to run with you. Number two, people also need to bring the expertise so that you create synergy. What do they know? There are many things they know that you don't know. There are people who have resources, financial resources. They can bring it on board, because we ask that we all need to sing in the same choir. And once you're able to bring people together and you have a clear vision and you have a clear roadmap and you are flexible, then you go ahead and run it. Thank you. And at the end of the day, when it becomes successful, they say it's us. It's not about you. Thank you.
Yeah. So coming back to that collective effort, collective commitment. Thank you. Alejandra, I want to come to you next. What strategies and practices have worked in your context?
Bueno, hay varias que han funcionado. Creo que vimos esto en la red de líderes. Vemos que el sistema de gobernanza puede impulsar o puede frenar, ¿sí? La mejora institucional. Según cómo se equilibre la autonomía, el apoyo y la responsabilidad compartida. Cuando los sistemas confían en las escuelas, promueven redes de aprendizaje. A mí una práctica que me ha dado mucho resultado fue el coaching y la observación entre colegas, entre pares, dentro de la institución. Y la posibilidad de promover espacios para que los equipos trabajen sobre proyectos comunes. Siempre centrando el foco en la persona y en la enseñanza, ¿no? Y en prácticas que puedan mejorar adentro y también fuera para compartir, dentro y fuera de la institución, a hacer redes con otras instituciones gubernamentales, no gubernamentales, hacer proyectos con hospitales, con lugares para ancianos, proyectos que tuvieran que ver con la solidaridad, también ha sido de buen aporte. Creo que hay mucho para hacer respecto del liderazgo, pero creo que lo más importante es el liderar y favorecer el desarrollo de las personas, fomentar momentos para que se pueda trabajar colaborativamente. Creo que no hay receta para esto. y el tema de trabajar en red dentro de la institución y fuera de la institución es algo que en mi caso y por los colegas que pude conversar ha sido de gran apoyo como estrategias que se han podido construir: observación, espacios de diálogo, tender redes, ir por ese camino. Creo y con un liderazgo basado en la confianza, ¿no? Volvemos como al principio y es nuestro tema central.
Thank you, Alejandra, and apologies to everyone. I know we lost the English translation partway through Alejandra's response, so apologies. We'll try and put in the chat what it is that you might have missed. Last round of questions, because our time is running out. Miriam, I'm going to come to you next. I'd love to hear very briefly just one or two kind of strategies or practices that you think have worked in your context, but I want to add a spin on the question, because there's a conversation in the chat that's asking, what's the kind of impact of culture and context on how we lead, and what might make for effective strategies depending on culture? So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
My instant reaction to that is the big R word, respect. And I think if we can stand back from all the heat and the noise and center respect, respectful relationships, respect for our communities, respect for our children, even when we then get it wrong, we've got a foundation of respect and safety to then go back and say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, but there's already a good relationship on which you can then negotiate a new way if you've made a mistake. And that just takes time and kindness and prioritizing the relationships and prioritizing being respectful over being right, over being anything else. And so that's where I would focus. And I think where we've made mistakes as EducAid, going out into communities and what have you, where we've been able to go, oh, whoops, sorry, and it's all been okay. It's where they've already known that we didn't do, if we hurt somebody, we didn't do it on purpose. And, you know, and then you can put it right. So as leaders, we will not have a respectful environment where kids are safe, where teachers are safe, where communities feel like they want to be part of the thing, if we don't center our work on respect. So that's where I end up.
No, and thank you for grounding us in that way, because I think so often we particularly as development actors, we look for the tangible, we look for the measurable, we look for the kind of low-hanging fruit, as it's often called, but actually relationships founded on respect in the way that you've described it, I think will take us much further than a lot of those other things, and if not, will underpin the success of those other things. So thank you for that. Bronwyn, I'm going to come to you with the last question, and it's one inspired by what I've read in the Q&A from the audience. And it's a question that I think many of us have struggled to answer over the years. And perhaps with the research that you've done, you're a little further forward in your thinking. But how do we measure the success of system leaders? How do we measure the success of middle tier actors? Is there a way that we can do that correlates to student learning, to teacher practice, to school leaders flourishing? What do you think?
I mean, that is the big question. And I just recently wrote an article that's on our website about this question. What is clear is that it's indirect, right? So you're talking about leaders that create the conditions in which teachers can thrive and do their best, and that young people can thrive and learn in the classroom. So it is really difficult to link and to judge and assess and pay school leaders based on student test scores. And performance, just because they're not involved in that directly. And of course, they're responsible for the whole enterprise. So, it's actually something we're very interested in helping to think through We're working, of course, we're funding it. We're not doing the work. We're funding researchers who are looking at interesting ways to look at change over time in a system. So looking at actually various different ways that the system is supporting school leaders to improve conditions in the school and how those conditions correlate with student learning. But I guess I'll just want to close by saying it's a very complex question, and we all want a simple answer to it, and it's
not that simple. Yeah. No, thank you for that. And we potentially need a whole other webinar just to explore that question. Panelists, I had hoped we would have another time to do another round and get a parting shot from you all, but our time is gone. But thank you each so much for your rich reflections and just the many years of experience and work that reflects. It's been really great to hear from each of you. And thank you to our audience. There's again a lot of rich discussion in the chat, and I think much there that we could dig into if we had the time, but thank you for engaging with us. So without much further ado, I'm going to hand back to Kate, who's going to wrap us up.
Thank you, Deborah, for your lovely moderation, and thank you, panelists, for an insightful conversation, and to you, our audience, for remaining so engaged throughout today's summit. The summit is a 3-day event, so we'll be back again tomorrow with a packed day. We've got deep dives into leadership and foundational learning, early childhood education, and gender. Please see the chat for more details and how to register and join us again. And finally, just thank you and wishing you all a very good rest of your day.